Hey, the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game is out. Have y'all got your copy yet? I haven't been able to get my hands on it yet, but I know it's from the same people who made the Friday the 13th game, so I am looking forward to checking it out as part of spook season next month. But with all this coverage about the new game, I'm reminded of the fact that there is also a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that came out not too long ago. I guess it's not that new. It came out around February of last year, and with all the news coverage being devoted to other things in February of 2022, it kind of slid under the radar. But I was thinking about it and I went, did that thing ever come out on disc? So I went looking for it, and if it did, I can't find it, like anywhere. So my assumption is no. It looks like it's locked on Netflix for the foreseeable future. And that brings me to talking about the whole state of affairs regarding streaming and the loss of physical media. This is what I'm calling the physical media death slide. And I decided it would be a good idea to go ahead and do a long-form series on this subject because I think there's a lot of ground to cover here. I think you'll find this pretty interesting. Let's take a look. This new Chainsaw flick was decided to be a Netflix exclusive at some point, despite its originally being planned as a theatrical release. So far as I can tell, it's only on Netflix and nowhere else. No theatrical, no discs, no rental options from other streaming services. Diddly dick. Now personally, I don't subscribe to Netflix. I'm just not a fan of the company. I was one of the last hangers-on of the old DVD by mail rental service until they finally shut that down, and now I have essentially zero reason to bother with Netflix at all, unless I decide that I absolutely must see this new Chainsaw film. But nah, if it's Netflix or bust, then it's a bust, 'cause fuck it. The film got almost universally bad reviews for one thing, but it's really just a lack of availability. Horror fans, like me, tend to be franchise whores who will find a reason to see a new installment in a beloved series, even if we know it sucks. We might not go to the theater on day one if we've got low expectations, but we'll probably see the film at some point. But you gotta make it available. I don't want to watch this new Chainsaw flick on fucking Netflix. Why can't they just put out a damn Blu-ray and try to reach those fans who want the physical copies for their collection? Because, as many others have already said, it's against their religion. And it's not just Netflix. A similar thing happened with the new Hellraiser film. You know, that remake that has kept the franchise under lock and key by Dimension Films for so long that at one point it was affected by the last major writer's strike. Well, it came out finally on Hulu, exclusively. Kind of the same deal. No Hulu, no movie. At least here in America. Although the Hellraiser remake did get a DVD release in Europe, so you can import that one if you got a region-free player. But why do we have to do that? Big surprise, I know, but I don't like Hulu either. And considering that Disney is about to be forced to drop tens of billions of bucks on Hulu thanks to one of their many dumbass contractual commitments as part of their plans to buy up everything in sight, Hulu is probably going to be a sore subject for the House and Mouse for a while to come. What we're seeing here is part of what I've been calling the physical media death slide. I know it's a little late to start covering this now, but I think we're in the more advanced stage, and I want to cover it before the end finally comes so we can document that in real time. There's a whole lot of ground to cover as to why all of this happened, but suffice it to say, I personally don't believe it's something that happened organically. I don't believe that this forced transition from the multimedia complex being a product-based culture to a content-based culture is merely a consequence of technological advancement. That's the narrative we've been given, but I don't buy it. Regardless, we have been forced into a content-based culture whether we like it or not, and we're stuck with streaming no matter how any of us feel about it. And this finally brings us to the titular point of this first video. Streaming sucks. For many reasons, but we'll cover just a few of the big ones in this video. For one thing, the whole idea of streaming is that you get this gigantic catalog of stuff for one low monthly rate. That's generally the concept, but once you start digging around looking for stuff, you begin to realize that the whole streaming world is actually very restrictive. For example, since we were talking about Hellraiser and I've got a Hellraiser franchise retrospective coming up in a future Celluloid Ferox video, it bears noting that if you want to watch the entire Hellraiser series, you should be able to see them all in one place. So can you? Well, your best option for this is, surprise, physical media. Although as mentioned, the 2022 film is locked on Hulu unless you import the European disc, which is probably what I'll end up doing. If you want to watch the entire series via streaming, though, you'll need to subscribe to multiple streaming services. Now, there is the rent or buy option on Amazon Prime where you have to pay extra to rent the movie for a few days, or buy it, where it'll stay in your catalog until Amazon decides to remove it for whatever reason. Which means, of course, you didn't really buy it at all. You don't own something if someone can just take it away anytime they feel like. You bought access to the title for an indeterminate amount of time. I don't know about you, but I think that sounds like a stupid way to waste money. If I'm going to buy a movie, then I want the physical copy that no one can just take away without it lawfully being considered a theft. So fuck that. I already pay a subscription fee for Prime. I don't want to pay even more money. Not to mention, not all of the Hellraiser movies are available that way. At the time of this video's creation, Hellraiser Revelations is listed as currently unavailable. There's another roadblock I'm sure you've encountered an annoyingly high number of times. And what does that mean, currently unavailable? We'll come back to that in a bit. As I said, you'll need multiple subscriptions. The first two movies are on Shudder, subject to change of course. We've already established the newest one being on Hulu, but it looks like a crapshoot on most of the other ones either being rent only at additional cost or just go fucking figure. Fuck that shit. Too complicated. Just give me a DVD box set already. Oh, and how do we know which version of the movie we're getting? There's an issue nobody talks about. What if the movie has a director's cut that's different from the theatrical version? Will the streaming service tell you which version they have? Well, sometimes, and sometimes not. It's another crapshoot. They just figure that you're stupid and won't know the difference, or you won't care. It does matter, though. You could be seeing an entirely different version of the film from the one whomever recommended it to you saw. Sometimes you get a fucked up version of the film, like when I tried to watch the movie Curtains on Amazon only to discover that it was some uncropped work print version with visible boom mics and production equipment in the frame. Sometimes you'll get some international version of the movie with scenes inexplicably cut out. Remember back in the 2000s when virtually every R-rated movie that came out in theaters had the inevitable unrated, too bloody for theaters version that came out on DVD? And they had to put the word unrated in gigantic lettering on the cover to differentiate it from the boring R-rated version that also got released? Sometimes the fucking lettering was so big, it overshadowed the actual title and people thought the movie was called Unrated. Anyway, what about all those flicks? How can you tell which version you're getting on a streaming service when all it gives you is one little thumbnail? I mean, you could read the description, obviously, but it's not always accurate. The quality control on streaming services tends to be shit, probably because they know the movies won't even be on there for very long. That brings us to the issue with distribution rights. As you probably know, distribution rights are rarely ever a lock-stock type of thing. One company will get the rights for theatrical distribution, another gets physical media rights, and yet others will get rights for streaming. Then it gets divided up even more when it comes to domestic versus international rights for all the above. Oh, and there isn't one set of rights for physical media either. Sometimes one company has DVD rights, another has Blu-ray, and yet another has 4K. What the fuck? Then the streaming rights are usually on a limited basis too. Often a movie will be on one streaming services for 3 months or 6 months or a year or whatever, and another service swoops in and takes it over to their platform for however long, and then rinse and repeat. You never really know where a title is at any given time, unless, of course, it's a title from one of the major studios that has its own streaming service. There was another fucking brilliant idea. Disney, Universal, Paramount, and Warner Brothers all have their own exclusive streaming services, meaning that most of them switched from licensing their titles out to major platforms like Netflix and Hulu to requiring people to subscribe to their services to get access to their catalog. So, a dumb consumer is theoretically supposed to be continuously subscribed to Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, Paramount+, Peacock, and Max if you want full access to all those libraries. And that's not even to mention all the smaller streaming services like Shudder, etc. Do these dipshits have any idea how much money per month that all adds up to? Nobody is going to do that. So that brings us to the streaming wars. And if you've been following the news on that, then you probably know that nobody seems to be winning the streaming wars. And I think we all know where that's headed. Cable 2.0. For those who cut the cord, meaning pretty much everybody, you're probably not looking forward to seeing this happen. Sooner or later, the streaming services will basically have no choice but to be bundled all together. And this will almost have to involve every last one of them being ad-supported. Why? Where else is that money going to come from? They can't force the average person to subscribe to 30 streaming services at a rate of $10 a month each, right? So they'll have to make their offerings cheaper, and that's financial suicide without something to keep the revenue streams viable for them. So yeah, you're getting ads on a streaming service that you're paying for, just like cable. And they'll only keep losing money if every household isn't getting their service, so it'll be included in the bundle, and the bundle will be your only option. You'll have to buy 30 services even if you only want 2 of them, just like cable. What happened to chase so much of their revenue away? Well, they positioned streaming as a better option to theatrical, for one thing, and they decided to do away with physical media for another, killing one revenue stream and severely restricting another. What was the fucking point of that? You really want to know? The point is taking control. There's the diabolical truth at the heart of all of this. It's really about controlling what media you consume and how you consume it. And why is that so important? Well, if you go back about 15 years or so, just before the streaming takeover began, the biggest problem facing the entertainment media complex was piracy. Torrenting, file sharing, illegal downloading, etc. I remember telling people at that time that there would be consequences for this. I'd be telling somebody about how I picked up this DVD or that, and they'd say, yeah, I just download everything. Then I'd roll my eyes and say, that's going to cause trouble. Then they'd say, well, I won't get in trouble. They can't just go bust everybody who downloads. Then I'd say, just because you won't face direct consequences doesn't mean there won't be consequences. There's going to be consequences that'll affect everyone. Then they'd roll their eyes and say whatever or whatever. Now here we are in 2023, and yeah, the fucking consequences are coming now. Of course, no one feels like they're paying a price for all their piracy habits, but we really are. The quality of output in Hollywood has declined, the quality of the distribution has taken a nosedive, and the general attitude of the entertainment media complex toward their consumers reflects this in a big way. I'm not pointing the finger here, though. I'm not innocent. I had my excursions on the open seas, too, but what got me to stop going that route was knowing that it would eventually destroy the physical media market. And it certainly did, but not directly. I think what Hollywood feared the most was the mainstream going the way of the porn industry. Not to dwell on it too long, but the smut business has been a fine example of what could happen if Hollywood didn't implement a new delivery method to combat piracy. The porn industry chose to go the if you can't beat 'em, join 'em avenue, effectively surrendering to the largest piracy operator, MindGeek, and allowing Pornhub to become the biggest empire in the industry, gobbling up studios left and right until they own just about everything. A few competing conglomerates rose up to devour everything MindGeek didn't get first, and what resulted was a similar consolidation to what we see in the corporate world, just on a smaller scale. Nowadays, it's kind of mysterious how the porn industry is making money at all. These mini conglomerates distribute everything online, and almost nobody actually pays for porn anymore, except for OnlyFans subscribers anyway. Now, I'm no expert on this sort of thing, and I can't say I know how this is really done, but it seems that the porn industry is surviving on a complex algorithm of ad sales, traffic driving schemes, and affiliate programs. At least they found a way to stay in business, but the alarming thing is that the entire industry is completely reliant on the health of the internet. In other words, they're only one major cyber disaster away from the whole industry being completely destroyed with seemingly no recourse whatsoever. And as you are probably aware, cyber attacks are a very real threat these days. Not to mention all the domestic movements trying to demolish the sex industry as they have for decades. It's a house of cards, to say the least. Now imagine if Hollywood had been in such a vulnerable position. If Hollywood hadn't found their salvation through streaming and piracy had gone unimpeded, then Hollywood could very well end up in the same way as the porn industry. And if that happened, well, Hollywood as we've always known it would probably be unrecognizable today. So to that end, streaming was something of a saving grace. Through streaming, though, the elites have discovered the ability to gatekeep content in a way they never could before. This brings us to our last talking point and the ultimate problem with streaming: censorship. I'm sure you've heard many examples by this point, from Donald Trump's cameo in Home Alone 2 being hacked out from the streaming version because Orange Man bad, to Disney's Song of the South being permanently unavailable on Disney+, with Bob Iger stating that the film is not appropriate in today's world. Okay, well that may be a valid reason not to produce a modern remake of Song of the South, but it's a fucking terrible reason to block it from contemporary audiences who may want to see it for the cultural artifact that it is. And hey, you might agree with those two items being taken off the menu, but I hope you see how it sets a dangerous precedent. If they can censor those things, then they can censor anything, for any reason. It's gatekeeping, pure and simple. Bob Iger has no right to determine what is or isn't appropriate for today's world, and frankly the whole today's world thing itself is bullshit right to the fucking core. It's still the same world we've always lived in, just with the passage of time leading us into a different cultural era. If we don't observe history, however, then our current cultural era has nothing to be compared to, and we're only allowing ourselves to inevitably repeat many of the worst cultural missteps of history by way of blind ignorance. The sinister truth is that the corporate elite want to control what you get to see and what you don't. Physical media was a bastion of independent choice, and that's why it needed to be eliminated. Despite it being a critical revenue stream for the industry, they made the choice to slowly remove it from the modern market, even as the newest iteration of 4K Blu-ray is just getting into the field, because it allowed audiences too much choice and agency. When the Hollywood elite can gatekeep every piece of media that is available, they can force conformity. They can influence the way people think, and they can suffocate freedom of thought and expression, all the while saying they are just advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's probably the most dangerous lie we're being told when it comes to our modern culture. We'll dig deeper into that in another episode, but for now I think you get the idea. Streaming sucks and we're stuck with it. Many people don't even own a disc player in their homes anymore. The DVD and Blu-ray sections at big box stores like Target are getting smaller and smaller, and the general attitude among everyday people about physical media is that if you're still buying it, then you must be stuck in the past and just haven't moved on to the modern technological era. To that I can only say good, because the modern technological era is a fucking travesty. On a more positive note, though, thankfully physical media is not completely dead yet. We still have some great boutique labels out there doing some really good stuff, like Shout Factory, Vinegar Syndrome, Severin Films, Arrow Video, plenty of others. They're all putting out deluxe versions of movies, new and old, television shows even, animation. And there's a lot of great stuff out there. It's a great time to continue supporting these labels because, as I said, for all the reasons I just outlined, I am not looking forward to living in an all-digital, all-streaming world. And in the next video, we're going to take a look back in time and show you just how much we've lost. We're going to do a little then and now comparison. And I don't mean to be completely negative on the whole thing, but it is a bit of a dire situation. That's why I'm calling it the Physical Media Death Slide. So we will come back with more episodes in this series. I hope to see you then. In the meantime, do subscribe, and I thank you for joining me. Cheers.